in our and yeah, I just told you this in the previous in our conversation before that. Yeah, there's one thing I'm really excited about because if the third party expert and the piece of evidence that we have, if that's what it is, and he goes through and shows some very good evidence of what it's of similar things, and it changes history.
Kaleb, welcome back. Third time. How you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me back.
Listen, Skinwalker Ranch season 4. What's new? What's been happening? Obviously you guys have wrapped. This is I think you guys are already busy filming season 5. But what are some of the things that have happened in season 4 that are different to the previous seasons?
So I would say the third party experts and the evidence that they collected that is beyond anything that we thought we were going to catch. So we've had a lot of really good high speed catches with new high speed cameras and during some rocket launches and stuff. Probably one of the big ones was we launched the rocket through the triangle, and high speed at night we caught the rocket blowing up at about 30 feet, and you could see something there forming. And there's another piece of that I can't go into yet because it's probably going to be shown in season 5. But it's another piece of evidence connected to that night that we found later, which is really cool because essentially it will show without a doubt what was caught in that high-speed camera. And then I think probably one of the cooler ones too is we had a company out called Omnitech, and the experiment was we were going to be shooting this antenna and tracking, and what it would be doing is tracking the International Space Station as it flew over the ranch. And when it was like coming over the horizon, they connected with it and they were getting a good signal from it. And as it started coming over the ranch, we completely lost signal with it. And the only explanation essentially is something was blocking that signal between us and the International Space Station. And as that space station continued on the path and actually got outside of like that really wide angle, they were able to pick it up again for a couple minutes. And at the exact same time, they had the LiDAR drone that was flying and creating that LiDAR scan, and you see that black hole of data with the high reflectivity circle around it. So essentially what that's showing is like you have laser or a beam of light going, and how LiDAR scans work is it's sending out millions of these lights out per second, right? And it starts literally painting a 3D image because the light hits, the theory is it hits whatever object it is, and then it reflects back and goes back to the scanner. But what we were seeing is it was hitting something, and that light was going and hitting. So say it hits that object above the triangle, it would bounce, hit the ground or wherever, come back to that point, and then back to the scanner. And that's how you think of why we have that weird reflectivity, perfect circle around that black hole, if you will, that's painted on the ground, because there's essentially none of those light particles are hitting that ground. So there was something there. And then on top of that, with us filming season 5, we've actually got some more information that will be shown in regards to that also. So and that's coming from some of these updated experiments we've been doing. So like we've got a lot of stuff. Season 5, I can already tell you there's 2 things that are it's crazy. We always talk amongst ourselves like, crap, like, how are we going to top? And it's not like we're trying to do that.
Yeah.
It's just like we catch such amazing stuff and we're going, oh man, like how do we like get more or like what do we do from here? Like how do we improve our how do we improve these experiments to the point where we're not just rinsing and repeating, but actually trying to figure out new ways of doing stuff and trying to improve those experiments. And yeah, the ranch has not let down this year already. And I just in our, and yeah, I just told you this in the previous, in our conversation before that, yeah, there's one thing I'm really excited about because if the third party expert and the piece of evidence that we have, if that's what it is, and he goes through and shows some very good evidence of what it's of similar things, and it changes history. And so I'm beyond stoked. So
Tell me with regards to that, and starting from back when season 1 first came out, how have the perceptions or the theories of all of you guys, how much has it changed to what you initially thought might be behind the paranormal activity and the phenomenon at Skinwalker Ranch? Through 4 seasons, you guys are busy filming 5 now. How has that perception changed as to what it could be now? And have you ruled anything out?
I think we were all, personally, I was pretty open to the idea of what was going on out there. I could say maybe 1 or 2 of the other guys were also pretty open to what it was, but because of their backgrounds and stuff, they were a little bit more hesitant. One, I'll tell you, is very skeptical even still. Even after all the stuff we've had. But I think it's safe to say at this point, we all accept the fact that we're probably dealing with some kind of intelligence. We still don't know if we still couldn't tell you if it's human or not. We tend to think I would say personally we tend to think it's not. But that's that's not the official what we think it is. That's more in our own conversations and the things that have happened, and then some of the technology things that we've been made aware of. There's still other pieces of evidence on that side of things where we go, this still isn't human, we think. And
Okay.
so I would say the perception of what we're dealing with is we are dealing with something that is some kind of intelligence. We still are trying to figure out what that is. And I would say most of the skepticism or most of the trying to explain things away at this point, that's gone. It's more we instantly are more like if something happens at my house or
Yeah.
at one of the other guys' house, we don't just try to explain it away now. We go, okay, like that was something that's being connected to the ranch. And we ask each other, we talk to each other and ask if somebody else has had something. And generally other people, someone else on the team has had something happen within a day or 2 also. So it's like, it's very hard to just discount at that point.
I think I remember like Travis came on as a huge skeptic. Am I right in saying that?
Yeah.
And then I read somewhere that he started having experiences at home where his car wouldn't start or something like that to that effect.
Yeah. So he's had multiple things happen at his home. I would say 4 of the 5 of us, we've all had crazy things happen at our homes that we can't explain. Some of it actually like very scary, or like the reaction was fear and that. And yeah, just crazy stuff. And then obviously all the stuff that we've had happen on the ranch, not just when we're filming, but like between hours or times when we're out there and but in between the filming season stuff, because like Erik and I and Tom, we spend a lot of time on the ranch, and it's like, when the other guys come out and stuff, it's like there's still stuff that happens, and I'm not saying that it happens like all the time.
Yeah.
It's I've been out there now for over 5 years, and it's like I have, yeah, for whatever reason, I don't know if I'm one that's just lucky or unlucky. I don't know, but I seem to have like a bit those big crazy things happen at least once, one, two, three times a year. It's spread out. Sometimes it is all within like 2 weeks. I don't know. There's no rhyme or reason to it that we've been able to figure out.
And well, obviously, I mean, there's been a lot of developments with regards to the whole UFO UAP phenomenon recently. I mean, there was the David Grush that came out earlier this year with his revelations that the US government's been harboring non-alien craft, or not non-alien craft, non-human craft, for quite some time now, and that they are in possession of non-human bodies.
Like, yeah.
And then obviously the whole UFO hearing that happened a short while back as well.
Yeah.
What are some things that you guys take out of that with regards to the research? Does that change the research at all, or is there a different perception for what could be at the ranch?
Mm-hmm. So there was another hearing, and I actually got the transcripts from it. One of our, it's funny, one of our camera guys, he's really big into it, has done a lot of research, very intelligent guy. He's been there. He's been one of our guys that's been on the ranch since season 1, day 1.
Yeah.
And like brings up a lot of good points, remembers things that were like, oh my gosh, like we forgot about that. Like this guy's awesome.
Yeah.
But he actually printed out the transcripts for one of the meetings that happened a couple weeks ago and gave them to me. And because just with our schedule right now, I'm not able to really delve into a lot of different things right now.
Yeah.
But he gave me those, and I thought it was really interesting because I think it was like one of the preliminary hearings or something, but it was still on record. I'd have to go find them. They're here somewhere. But he basically took me to the one page. He's like, look, this is where it gets really interesting. And it's where they're talking about their sources, where the information is coming from.
Yeah.
And it lists out all these different agencies and all these different past organizations and stuff. And one of the main organizations that it was talking about was the Department of War, which when the country was founded, it was the Department of War, not the Department of Defense.
Okay.
And I want to say that the Department of War lasted until World War II or World War One. I'd have to go look, but it was the precursor to the Department of Defense.
Okay.
And then in another section of this document, it was talking about the different phenomenology and the different things that this evidence would be pertaining to. And that's where it got really cool also with the examples that it was using, and the language it was using. It was literally all the stuff that we're doing on Skinwalker Ranch. It's all the stuff that we've talked about. It's all the potential things. So it was like this meeting. They're literally talking about everything that is coming from Skinwalker Ranch that we're showing, the ideas that we're talking about. And so it was kind of one of those really cool things where we're going. It's like these people are like paying attention. And then obviously one of the big things was Travis being the head scientist or the chief scientist for the the UFO task force with Jay Stratton.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to betray some of their trust in some of our private conversations about some of this stuff in regards to Skinwalker Ranch and some of the other areas that they were able to investigate. But it's really cool, exciting stuff, essentially showing that Skinwalker Ranch is one of those focal points of where a bunch of this information is coming from. And it's one of those places that people are coming back to and cross-referencing and going, yeah, it's like they're finding a lot of really cool evidence that supports a lot of these other areas.
Some of the other areas is Mount Wilson Ranch, part of that.
Yeah.
An interesting conversation with Carl Vibe, also known as Carl the Crusher's his YouTube channel, but because he does a lot of research at Mount Wilson.
Yes.
Robert Bigelow owned Mount Wilson before Skinwalker Ranch.
Yes.
So what is the significance of, what do these places have in common? Except for Bob Bigelow.
Yeah, so my understanding is, I've done a couple of different things with Carl, and he's been to the ranch, and I haven't been able to get down there to Ranch Wilson or Mount Wilson Mount Wilson. Yeah, I haven't been able to get down there yet. He's invited me out, and anybody else on the team who'd like to go down, and obviously there's been some other work done there also. But it is interesting, some similar phenomena being reported. And then I know there's another really famous ranch that was like the movie set. I want to say it was the Bradshaw Ranch, I want to say.
Okay.
And what's really similar is a lot of the reported phenomenology and things like that that's happened. And for whatever reason, all these crazy things are happening. And I think why it comes back to Skinwalker Ranch is the frequency and just the wide spectrum of phenomenology that's reported there, and also in the surrounding area, the whole Uinta Basin. But for whatever reason, even in the basin, Skinwalker Ranch is a hot spot for it. And I think that's where they all tie together, though, is there's similar reported phenomenology and things like that. But at the end of the day, Bigelow moved the main focus to Skinwalker Ranch, if I remember correctly. I can't. But anyways, like I just know there's a lot of similar reported activity in all of these places. But for whatever reason, Skinwalker Ranch has become the hotbed for it, or the central focus point for a lot of it. And I don't know, it might be just because we were the first ones to really bring all this different technology out and start showing it in the public light, like say through the television show and all that. And really trying to show an open book and really show people like there's crazy stuff going on here. And we're not saying that it's not going on in other places, but for whatever reason, Skinwalker Ranch is this really hot spot.
I think people need to remember as well that it wasn't just a ranch that Brandon Fugal bought, and then it was like, okay, strange things are happening. Let's start and he was then approached by the History Channel. Things have been going on there since way before Brandon Fugal purchased it,
and way before Bigelow ever owned it.
Yes.
Way before the Shermans or the Myers owned it. Like with the petroglyph and some of the other stuff that we have out there, we don't know how long it's been going on for.
Yeah, I think there's been reports going on for the last 200 years. If I remember something, I remember that number in my head. It's been going on for over 200 years. But does Bigelow still have any contact with Brandon Fugal about the research going on, and does he kind of give opinions about stuff and give his input at all?
Not that I'm aware of. There might be conversations between Brandon and him I'm not aware of. I don't know. I don't think so. If I remember correctly, essentially when Brandon bought it, Bigelow said, I want nothing to do with this place ever again. I will never come back out there. I will never talk about this place ever again. That was my understanding in one of their meetings. I do know that Travis and Erik have remained in contact and actually speak with some of the other individuals, the other scientists and stuff. Some of those names, like Kit Green or Jacques Vallée, or some of those other names that are connected to the ranch due to the Bigelow time. And I know there's conversations between them still, even today. And so I'm privy to some of those conversations, but it's one of those things. It's not like they're really heavily involved. It's it's kind of like an every once in a while kind of thing. So like I here's probably a good example of this too, is like we talk about front loading a lot on the ranch, because it's like we don't want to give people that we bring onto the ranch any information that helps them like form a conclusion in the direction that we'd want or hope that they'd go, right?
Okay.
We don't want to do that kind of front loading. So we don't, whenever we bring people out for experiments, we don't tell them what specifically what we might be looking for. It's a lot harder now, essentially, because of the show. People are aware more when they come on of what's going on. Some of them are still like, yeah, I haven't heard of the show or whatever, and they're just looking at it as like, a good opportunity to be on TV and advertise their company, essentially, right?
Yeah.
But personally, this is how I know that those conversations still happen. Is one of the first experiences I ever had on the ranch was within 6 to 8 months of being out there. There was a guest, or two guests that I was with one night, and essentially we saw, it was 1:30 at night, and the whole area was black. It was dark. It wasn't a full moon, so it was pretty dark. And I was between Homestead 2 and Homestead 3 by one of the bait pens that were out there. And essentially the whole area lit up green, like someone flipped the light switch on in a room. And we looked over, and there's this light coming down above Homestead 2 in a controlled descent. It was, the light was kind of, the object itself wasn't emitting the light, and it was kind of flickering a little bit, but nothing too crazy. There was no sound, there was like no wind that I remember. And essentially when this thing got down low enough and went behind the trees, it disappeared, and it was like night again. Someone flipped the light off.
Yeah.
But the whole area again was green. So like imagine walking into a room and changing out your light bulb or putting like a green screen on, and it's like that, and everything's green. That's what the entire ranch where we were at was looking like, and there was no shadows. Excuse me. No shadows, anything like that. So it was like this whole area, like we were just seeing green everywhere.
Yeah.
Now, fast forward a couple years, actually this last year, Erik brought to me some information from one of those scientists from Bigelow's days, essentially describing the exact same experience.
Okay.
I had no idea that happened. I had no idea that these other individuals had reported that kind of thing. Erik had heard about it. He didn't let me know. Or he had some kind of conversation, and that came up, and he was like, he didn't want to bring it to my attention until he actually had it, to know that it was an actual thing that had happened. So when he finally got it, he was like, dude, I gotta show you this. And he basically brought me this journal that's from one of these other scientists during Bigelow's time, and they talk about the area lighting up green, and all these individuals seeing exactly what I saw. And that was the important part there, is I had no idea that had happened in the previous to other people. So I know those conversations happen, and the experiences that we have, we come to find out that someone else has had similar experiences that weren't reported. And so it's like, it's that vindication of knowing that we are on the right track, if you will, on the right track, or this stuff happens.
Yeah, because you guys don't have, I think you mentioned the last time you were on the podcast, you guys don't have a lot of research information from the Bigelow days.
No.
Which is kind of, didn't they want to disclose it to Brandon Fugal when you bought the ranch, or what? Why? What is the reason for that?
We don't really know. And essentially the biggest thing I would say on that is Bigelow owned it. He was at that time, it's a private company still. Same reason why Brandon's saying a private company is, a private company doesn't have to release information if it doesn't want to.
Yeah.
Right. No one can make them. At least That's how it should be in the US.
Yeah.
Is your private property is yours by right.
Yeah.
You know, you and no one can force you to release it or whatnot. Now, obviously, there's two sides of that, and this kind of goes back to like the UFO hearings and stuff. Is with these individuals coming forward and talking about, hey, there we have this stuff, but it's also tied up in some of the private corporations. And one of the things that's been talked about is like General Eisenhower, or when he was President Eisenhower, it was one of the things he warned about was having all these big corporations tied to the military,
Mm.
or and holding on to things that never come to light.
Yeah.
And because of the nature of private property and stuff in the US, it's not going to come out. Which, yes, I have mixed feelings on that, but at the same time, it's there for a reason, because it's like it's not one of those. I guess I'm one that I believe in that private property right.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's frustrating because we don't know what they potentially found, but then it's also pretty much been confirmed to us by Jay and some of the other guys that yeah, they never had the technology we have. They didn't have a bunch of the assets that we have. And so our investigation is far beyond anything they actually ever could do at that time.
So
And
it's in the long run.
yeah, so it's like, yeah, it'd be interesting to know a little bit more of maybe what they did find or experience.
Mm.
But at the same time, we've already been told that like we're so far ahead of anything that they've done that we've probably experienced as much, if not more, than they ever did.
Has there been any government intervention or attempts at government intervention to kind of railroad the research at all?
No,
Men in Black, anything?
no, nothing like that. And I think that goes back to what you see in some of season 4. We have a bunch of military helicopters and aircraft fly over the ranch on different occasions, some in broad daylight, which I think at this point, without further evidence, I would say that they were just flying over the ranch to see the ranch and
Yeah.
say why not. I know there's a special forces training area north of in northern Utah and in the Idaho area, in Montana, and you got special units, forces all over the place like that, and they go out do training. But I will say the one night when we launched the rocket in the triangle and we had the high-speed camera and we caught what we caught with the high-speed camera, what people are calling the blob, and this low-flying Black Hawk helicopter comes over. I'll say that night was definitely very hard to dismiss as someone just going out for a joyride. Flying a helicopter is very expensive. We know what it cost for Brandon and Cameron to fly that helicopter.
Yeah.
Thousands of dollars an hour, essentially, between your fuel, when you land it, and the maintenance costs that has to go into it, which I'm very familiar with that side of things because on the military side, being on tanks have the largest budget next to aircraft because of the maintenance and all the repairs and things you have to do. And the M1A1 has a jet engine in it, similar to what these aircrafts have. So again, big budgets. And then on top of that, when you're flying at night, you're using NVGs. The trainings and the qualifications you have to go through that is astounding.
What are MBGs?
Or NVGs, night vision goggles.
Oh, okay, sorry.
No, you're good. So, and Cameron, to his knowledge, he's one of the he's the only commercial pilot in the state of Utah that we know of flying with night vision goggles.
Okay.
Yes, Life Flight in Utah has it and uses it, I'm sure. But again, they're not just going out for joyrides. Those guys are, when they're flying at night, they're generally flying a patient from point A to point B. or they're helping with. We've on the law enforcement side, we've called out a life flight helicopter because they have the NVG capability to help try and find somebody. And it was a missing kid in like the middle of January, at like 2 a.m. in the morning. So very rare occasion for them to come out, but they have a purpose in being out.
Yeah.
And so again, so a lot of things that night that make me go, yeah, there was something else going on that night, and it's raised some interesting questions.
And with regards to Travis Taylor, as you mentioned, he was part of that UAP task force. When did most of the crew, because obviously he couldn't disclose this, initially. When did he disclose this, and was there kind of a feeling of, I won't say, well, whose side are you really on, or, you know, a level of trust that felt like it might have been broken with regards to him staying quiet, although he had to stay quiet, I suppose. You know, how did that play out?
So he broke it to the team a couple weeks before it became public.
Okay.
He did go, hey guys, I want you guys to know this. I was fine having been in the military. I get it.
Yeah.
You know, that I had top secret clearance.
Yeah.
Because of being on a tank, there's things that are top secret on the M1A1, or at least there was at that time. I'm sure it still is. But anyways, so I knew it. Like, so I knew why he had to be quiet. I understand. So I was like, whatever, you know, and there was one on the team that was very angry and lashed out, and it was kind of unpleasant for a little bit.
Yeah.
But most of us were like, oh, that's cool, because in our conversations with him, essentially he did get that position because of what we did on Skinwalker Ranch season 1. When he came out and started seeing things, and with his other previous work, he recognized that if what we were seeing was real, and what we continue to see today, and we are pretty confident that it is something that's not not human.
Yeah.
But if it was a near peer, he was like, wait a minute, like I do have to report this.
Yeah.
And so he had to go to the Pentagon and report this information, and that's essentially when he met Jay Stratton. And Jay was like, hey, I know what you're doing. And at that time, we had no idea who Jay was or any of us on the team. And we had no idea that Jay had actually been on the ranch during Bigelow's time. And that's actually one of the reasons, again, why Jay was so interested in having Travis come on, was because of his scientific background and then his connection to the ranch, obviously.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it was really cool because Travis being on the task force like that, essentially because of the work we were doing here on Skinwalker Ranch, it just adds that level of what we're doing out here, that level of credibility and everything. It just adds to what we're doing out here. And and at the end of the day, I thought it was awesome.
Well, I suppose the one crew member who you obviously don't want to name, who had issues with Travis not coming or being forthcoming, originally, I suppose that was because they probably thought that he could have been withholding information that could have helped in the research, for the first few seasons.
And it was kind of both. It kind of went both ways. It was like, okay, what's he not telling us that he learned on that side?
Yeah.
Or what is he telling them that's coming from our side?
That was going to be my next question. So, was there ever a thought that, I'm really stirring shit up now, but was there ever kind of like a feeling that he could be like a disinformation agent, taking information, or kind of maybe trying to throw the research off? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and that was one of the points of conversation that was brought up by the one team member and stuff. And I was like, you know what, at this point, I've seen I've had my own experiences out there.
Yeah.
One of the most crazy experiences I've had, Travis was right there with me. We saw the same thing, we interacted with the same thing. And then just getting to know Travis and working out with him and stuff,
Yeah.
I was like, and having been in the military and understanding the NDA side and all that stuff, I was like, I never felt uncomfortable about it, or that he's betrayed my trust, if you will. And so I guess I just see it through some different lenses than some of the other guys would, or have that understanding. So and just with the nature of the realm that we're in, the paranormal, UFO and stuff, I've seen that there's so much backstabbing and just a lot of vile stuff out there and a lot of misinformation and stuff. And so I'm like, I try not to go into other areas, if you will, that I'm not entirely sure about. But when it comes to Skinwalker and the guys on the team and stuff, yeah, there's issues. There's, just like any group of people, you're going to have things come up. But again, I've gone off the fact that in my personal conversations with Travis and my personal experiences and things like that, I haven't felt any reason to mistrust him. And then again, I'm not going to betray his trust or Jay's or anybody else's on the teams. But there are private conversations
100%.
where we've talked about things, and he shared information with me that he thought I needed to know, especially on my security side of things. And so it's like, I've been made aware of things that aren't public, in regards to the ranch and stuff. So it's, so again, I could understand why those feelings are there, but at the same time, I wasn't one that was worried about it. And then I think the big thing was, at the end of the day, he got the position because of what he was doing on Skinwalker Ranch, and just again shows how important that the ranch is.
Yeah, I suppose, with your military background as well, you would kind of understand where he was coming from. But to someone who was, perhaps did not have your background, they could be of the perception of Travis would be explaining something away, and then he'll be on the phone to the government saying, "Holy shit, this is this is what's happening there," or whatever the case may be. But the whole UFO phenomenon, I guess paranormal in general, and I told I had this discussion with Carl the other day, Carl Vibe, is that it's such a rabbit hole. And it's such a rabbit hole, almost, and I wouldn't say by design, but there's so many elements to it. It's not only black and white. There are things such, and you go back to the Roswell days, there is stuff such as disinformation that does get spread to throw people off a certain narrative. And it's a never-ending rabbit hole. And I think unless you see things for yourself, that is pretty much as much certainty as one would get. Because I think even with, I've had the most interesting conversations with you while we aren't recording, and our conversations after recording are usually longer than the actual podcast itself. And I know a lot of one concern is that because it's a TV show, that people have already made up their minds, saying, well, if this was serious research, it wouldn't be
it'd be shut down.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But you've also told me it's not as cut and dry as that. It's not like it's because the production crew does sometimes get in the way. Of what you guys do. And has that gotten better as time went on? Obviously, it's a lot better now than it was in season 1 with regards to certain boundaries that are set.
Yeah, it's that continued dance of the production company is there to make a television show. That's their thing, right? And more than just making a television show, they want to tell the story. Right. And so that's their main focus. Obviously, the team's main focus is the science and trying to discover what the heck's going on, and those conflict at times. So it's just what it is. um, and that's what we have to. That's I think that's where people are. Say like our insider program. A lot of the insiders, a lot of them are new. When they're newer, they get on and they have a lot of the same questions
Yeah.
that have been answered 1,000 times before, but they don't know, and so we have to have that patience. But sometimes it's like, oh, we're having to answer this again, right?
Yeah.
But like when it comes to the television show, people recognize that look. Yes, get rid of the editing, get rid of the music, get rid of that, and what do you have? And what are you seeing? Right? And they're doing a good job of showing some of these crazy things, and it's like, look, they're taking and giving you information about experiments that we're doing and trying to set them up and trying to condense down hundreds of hours of film footage into a 45-minute window. And that's why we did the insider thing, to try and get more information out there that way. But it's that constant dance. It's trying to make everybody happy kind of thing, and conflicts happen. It's going to happen.
Yeah.
And it continues to happen, but it is what it is. And I try to, there's things that piss me off, yeah, but at the end of the day, we are all trying to get to the same goal, if you will, of getting good answers and portraying it in a good way.
But it's also, I suppose, it's also frustrating. I suppose it must be frustrating for you guys because, again, there's so many angles to this paranormal subject. Because now, if it wasn't televised and you guys didn't talk about it, then there would be speculation of, well, they're not sharing it with the public. Do you know what I mean? What is this bullshit? Blah, blah, blah.
Just how many people would even know that the ranch was there?
Well, I think some of the diehard researchers, or
exactly,
would know about it. They'd know but I mean, if you guys were to say, if Brandon Fugal put out something in the news or something in the media that there's like top level research going on to explore the phenomenon at Skinwalker Ranch, people would have questions. And but if you guys didn't disclose anything, then again, it would be the old thing of the government is hiding stuff.
Yep.
They're hiding stuff from the public. But now you have a TV show, and now it's the exact opposite. Well, it's a TV show, so no, it must be bullshit. Do you know what I mean? So it's kind of like it must be where's that happy medium? So I think unless you do see something for yourself, if people are skeptical, I think unless they don't see something for themselves, they're never going to be satisfied.
Well, and so you got lots of different layers there. So there's the people, and we deal with them all the time.
Yeah.
I hate even bringing mention to them.
Yeah.
So I won't even name them, but you have that group that a UFO could literally land in their yard, the alien come up and kick them right in the nuts, and they would still be like, oh, it's fake. And so there's always going to be those people, and there's some of them that we know are essentially getting paid, or are part of a group that just disinformation, just attack anything you can, and that's their mandate.
Yep.
And then there's those people who, for whatever reason, that's just how they are. If you get 10 people in a room, there's going to be the one guy who is just going to disagree with everybody just to be that guy,
exactly,
because he thinks it's funny or whatnot, right? And if you pull him aside,
he's in the know.
Yeah,
he's in the know. No one else knows, but he knows.
That and that same person you could pull aside and he's like, oh yeah, dude, I totally agree with you. I just have to be the guy that I just have to be that guy, like but then I would say, like, majority of people, very intelligent, like our insiders, I again are a good example of this. Is there's a lot of people from lots of different disciplines, retired individuals, people like our age, lots of people from all these different backgrounds, very intelligent. They can add two to two together and get four. And they ask a lot of really good hard questions. and they see it for what it really is. And one of the really cool things with the insider program is the amount of activity being reported back to us by these people in their own homes.
Yeah.
So, and it's one of the crazy things is it's how do you quantify this? Like I'm the guy with the phone that wigged out in season 2, and people have seen, no, we have issues with electronics and stuff.
Yeah.
And the amount of insiders that join and start watching the cameras and stuff, and then something happens at their house to their own electronics that they can't explain. It's fun for me to see that, because it's kind of the vindication thing, but then at the same time it's like it's freaking some of them out. So I can't tell you how many of them that I've talked to in conversation through the website where they're like, yeah, I bought like a brand new laptop or a brand new iPad or something because I was so interested in becoming the insider and watching like the live feed and interacting, that they felt that was kind of their justification for getting something like that. But then that brand new iPad or the brand new computer like dies on them, or gets fried or something, or all the lights in their house start wigging out when they start watching the live feed. Like it's one of those things that we talk about. Is this something that happens all the time and people just don't even like, oh, it's whatever? But because they start watching the show and stuff, they start paying attention to things and they start going, oh, wait a minute. But then that's the other side of it too, is all these people swear to us they've never had anything like this happen before. And then there's the people that have shared videos, and stuff, and been like, yeah, I've seen stuff, I'm a believer, what you guys are showing, they can see it for what it is, and they take that information and go, holy crap. So yeah, you're dealing with all these different kinds of people. And like you were saying, if the television show hadn't happened, I can tell you, when I first started doing security out there, you'd have like a car show up once a month because somebody had read a book or somebody knew about Skinwalker Ranch.
Yeah, well, I think George Knapp and Jeremy Corbell made a documentary prior to Fugal.
Yeah.
I think it was prior to Brandon Fugal buying it.
They actually did it when he bought it. So I don't know if they did one before.
They did, because his face was still blacked out.
Yep.
I think. Yeah.
Yep. So
yeah,
that one.
That's another point. He didn't want to be involved. He didn't want publicity for this.
No.
Yeah. So that's actually a good point. His face was blacked out, and his voice was distorted, but he says a few words that you kind of like watching it back now. I know it's Brandon Fugal.
Yeah,
because the way he pronounces certain words. Yeah.
And that was one of his things is when the show's coming out, he's like, I can't be known as the owner.
Yeah.
Because it could potentially hurt some of his business deals.
Yeah.
Or some of those relations. And essentially it was Kevin Burns, the guy who started Prometheus, was like, Kevin Burns had a magic with people that he could get people to do whatever, and he was like, Brandon, there's no story if you're not in it, kind of thing. Like, you're a vital part of it, you have to be in it. And essentially he was able to get Brandon to okay that, or be a part of it. And yeah, so it's like it barring those people who are really in the UFO world, your general public would have no idea Skinwalker Ranch existed without the television show. And I think you're right. If if we had continued the investigation without that side of it, he could have put stuff out, but you'd have had the people, oh, it's all BS. But now, because of what we are showing on the public side of things, more people are going, oh wow. And this is what I think is really cool, is if you watch season 1 through season 4, you see the evolution of how we get to where we're going, or why we're doing what we're doing. And then there's also a bunch of stuff that hasn't been shown. Just I don't know the reasoning or any, they just haven't shown some stuff. Not saying that they won't come back and show some of that, I don't know. That's where like we have our NDAs and we can't talk about certain things that haven't been shown, you know. But yeah, it's
Well, and that's obviously NDAs with what? With Prometheus.
yeah,
Because
Prometheus history and
it doesn't make a difference to your research of what you can and cannot say. That's kind of a sideline. That's a sideline. That's kind of a privilege that the public gets to see.
Yeah,
I mean,
so essentially anything that's filmed during the time frame that they're out here, and basically it's once it's shown in the show, we can talk about it.
Yeah,
you know, and then there's the side where that again why we did the insider program is there's 8 to 9 months there where people are like, oh my heck, is there anything going on? And we started that to try and give more information and be like, yeah, we're trying to be as open as possible, barring there is times where it's not expedient to get information out because of security reasons, things like that. And then just, you know, privacy issues.
Yeah.
So it's like there's reasons, but at the end of the day, we are trying to show everything as fairly as possible and as quickly as possible. You know, but at the end of the day, it is still private property, and please respect that.
I think there's always going to be that, and I mean, it's human nature. There's always going to be that you can't please everyone. There's going to be a certain group that will subscribe to purely the fact that it's a TV show, it's fake.
Yeah.
Case closed, done. And I mean, and I think that goes on a lot, particularly in the UFO community, where people try to make up their own mind. They have to reach a conclusion today about what's going on. And if it doesn't fit their narrative, for whatever reason, it's bullshit.
Yeah.
Which is...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, which is pretty frustrating, particularly with this community, because there's a lot of people that claim to be experts and they claim to be in the, you know, they're almost like the right hand, the right hand of government and the higher ups there. They know. Meanwhile, it's just a regular dude who's giving his opinion behind a computer screen.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's one of those things you have to be aware of for sure when you're on the UFO, in the UFO realm, if you will, is again, there's a lot of I was so surprised. Well, I guess I should say I'm not surprised, but I am. Just because you look at the history of it and there was so much backbiting and backstabbing and attacking one of each other for stuff, and that's where I think we've tried to stay outside of that and not like go after other people or say who's an idiot or who's not, you know, because it's like, you know, people aren't dumb. They can figure it out. People, and at times I've been like, yeah, be careful about where you're getting your information from.
Yeah.
And we've seen it firsthand. There was an individual on the ranch that made it on the show. His equipment had some issues, and come to find out within a couple weeks, he was talking about his idea of what was happening on the ranch, and all these people are like, oh my gosh, wow. But it came from Erik. Erik told him about this idea, and Erik actually wrote a paper in 2016 about showing this idea and why he thought that it was this, and it was just kind of a fun idea, you know, just some of the things that Erik was seeing at that time when he first come onto the ranch, and he thought about it, and after seeing some other stuff, he was like, maybe it's this, and he writes this paper, and he's shared that story with multiple people, and he's very upfront about going, look, I'm not saying that this is what it is, but it's a hypothesis, if you will. It's a interesting thing to think about what's, say, potentially in the Mesa, but at the end of the day, there's no hard evidence of that being what it is. But anyways, like, this guy gets out there and starts saying, oh, this is my idea, like, after what I saw out there, this is what this is. And all these people are like, oh my gosh. But then we're seeing that, we're going, wait a minute. And it's fun. Like, I'm not gonna lie. Like, there's times where people ask me about it. I'm like, oh yeah, I tell them exactly what I just told you. That's Erik's idea.
Mm.
He wrote the paper in 2016, and that guy is just parroting what Erik said.
Now,
So
Erik, I remember speaking to Erik the first time I had you on the podcast, and we had a good conversation again when we finished the podcast. And Erik is probably one of the most intelligent people I've ever met. I wouldn't be surprised if Erik is an alien, to be honest. That guy is like,
yeah, that's one of our jokes.
Whoa, okay.
Yeah, Erik's brilliant. Like,
Yeah,
I put Erik up against anybody.
yeah.
And I've even made like the joke that Erik's going to be the guy people are quoting in 500 years. When people find all his, or really find out who he is, and like just his ability to come off with like just information, and how fast he thinks, and just everything. Like, just he's brilliant.
Like, what is his background exactly? Because he's the chief scientist of the research at Skinwalker Ranch. But what is his story? What is his background?
Oh, I don't want to go too so.
Well, education wise type. Yeah.
So I know he went to school. I know he worked at IBM for a long time as a developer.
Okay.
When he was very young, he got scooped up at a young age to work there because, at that time they were the who's who. And
yeah.
When he was working there, he was developing stuff for them. And then he took some personal time to go do some other things on the religious side of things. He, in his early 20s. And then he moved to Utah and started working for some different companies out there doing development of products and stuff. So I know one of the big things that he developed himself was the M drive, I believe. It's essentially a storage device that will not degrade over time. Okay. So it's what the government or any big probably the best example would be like their Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. They've built this big facility out here, and I know there's another big government facility out there in Salt Lake that's essentially, it's built into the mountain, and they use that M drive to store all information.
Okay.
Right. So it's massive. It's armed security, all that stuff. Erik's the one who developed that piece of technology that stores all that information, because again, it doesn't degrade over time. Water won't destroy it. Damewell made it impervious,
Okay.
And then he worked through those connections, is essentially how Brandon found him years ago. And Brandon was involved with some other scientific research or something. And people were throwing money at this project, and Brandon was like, wait, I want to get another guy in here. And he heard through the grapevine about Erik and brought Erik on, and essentially within like 6 to 8 months, Erik came in and was like, oh, this is crap. You guys are being had by this guy.
Okay.
Yeah, and this is why it came in and blew it up, and essentially, was figured it out and was like, no, this isn't viable. What you guys are dumping all this money into is not viable.
Yeah.
And that should tell you something about Erik, because Brandon brought him in as essentially as a job.
Yeah.
And Erik killed his own job.
Yeah, by saying it's crap.
by figuring out and going, wait a minute. And he's like, so that should tell you something about Erik's character.
Yeah.
Erik is not gonna fill you full of crap. And he'll think about things. He'll have that conversation with you. And I thought one of the coolest things or best shout outs that I've heard was from Eric Weinstein on the Joe Rogan podcast, where he was talking about Skinwalker Ranch, and he was like, look, he mentioned he talked to Brandon, and then he's like, talk to Erik Bard all the time, and he was like, "Look, Eric's one of the few guys I know that actually understands this certain kind of math."
Yeah.
And I'm paraphrasing. And he's like, and both Brandon and Erik are telling me stuff, and he's like, I know Eric's not going to blow smoke up my, pipe, and he's one of the most intelligent people I know.
Yeah.
And he's saying that weird stuff's going on out there, and he doesn't know what's going on. So I thought that was one of the really cool shout outs that I've heard. And we all went to Erik, we're like, dude, he was on Joe Rogan, and Erik said this about, and Erik was like, oh yeah, I talk to him quite frequent. Yeah, and he's a very nice guy.
Yeah.
Just like whatever. Doesn't care.
That's the type of guy. Well, that's kind of how I gauged him. He doesn't. Yeah, he's not fazed by. I don't think he's fazed by the fact that he's on a TV show or that.
Oh,
any of that.
No.
Yeah.
No, he hates it. He hates the show.
Imagine, yeah.
And we joke about that all the time, but it is what it is, and that's where it's like I said, there's it is what it is at this point, and we just have to move forward and do what we can.
Has one of the things that I noticed as well with the UFO hearings was that behind some of the guys that were speaking, like David Grush, behind him sitting was George Knapp, Jeremy Corbell, the usual. Have they expressed any, or are they still in contact with anyone from Skinwalker Ranch? Because I think Knapp and Corbell made a documentary about it. And yeah, have they shown any interest again?
So I think we've actually are in the process of maybe seeing if George Knapp would come back out on some stuff. But I don't. I know we've remained in contact with them. I know George Knapp more than Jeremy, I think. Like, I got Jeremy's number. I'm sure I could text him right now and see if he'd, maybe chat about something. But like, I know Erik and some other guys have talked to him more recently than I have. But yeah, I'm sure they would at this point. I know there was something in the hearings where it was one of the witnesses, and he was talking about what he'd seen, and he's like, I was not a believer in any of this. I did not believe in any of this stuff. I never watched any History Channel shows or anything like that, which we thought was funny, but he's like, and that was kind of like a silent shout out to what we're doing out here,
Yeah.
And we thought that was really cool, that he mentioned that. And I want to say that was one of the pilots, one of the other witnesses, not Grush. I can't remember the other guy's name.
Graves.
Graves, maybe Graves.
Graves.
I thought there was maybe another one, but
is it Ryan Graves?
I think so.
Yeah. Anyways. Yeah.
But yeah. And so it was like kind of one of those things where over the last couple of years, it's just been really cool seeing essentially like what we're doing, like, or in the UFO world, everything that's being talked about, you can kind of trace back to us.
Yeah, from like to
Skinwalker Ranch, whether it's Bigelow's days or the show and Brandon's ownership of the ranch. It's like, or how much stuff that we're doing out here is tied to everything, and we're showing it. Like, we're seeing the orbs, we're seeing different craft, we're having these crazy paranormal experiences, and all of it.
Well, with David Grush's revelations, I mean, this goes back, now you got to open up the questions about Roswell again, because they were also talks that there were alien bodies and all that stuff happening back then. So, yeah, well, again, it's a rabbit hole. Look, I think it's it's a rabbit hole in terms of, like, again, I don't think we're alone in the universe. I just think, how can we be? Do you know what I mean? It's so massive. And yet it obviously remains the biggest question that mankind has: are we alone in the universe? I don't really think it, I think the question more like, how can we not be?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's again, different strokes for different folks. That's what makes I suppose the human species so interesting, is because everyone's entitled to their own opinion.
Yeah.
And or at least we used to be.
Yeah.
With a lot of stuff.
Right.
Yeah. Crap that's going on now.
Oh yeah. Well, on that note, it's like, just thinking all the stuff going on, and and one of the things that, like, Erik, how he looks at, like, what good can come from it, right? What's a deliverable here for, say, the science or the show or anything? And he's like, if we can actually show people, through the investigation, honesty and things like that, and that actually is something that still matters. And also, like, we deal with this all the time, like the whole attitude of wanting the answer now, right?
Yeah.
And jumping to conclusions and stuff. And it's like, we tell people, look, this is an investigation. A good example of what happens when information, before any information is released, look at NASA. If I remember correctly, Travis told me this. He said you do your investigation or your experiment and stuff, and you cannot release anything until after 2 years. You have to spend 2 years of investigation, checking and doing all that stuff and double checking, have people attack your work, if you will, and continue evolving that before you, and you have to do that for 2 years before you release anything. So look at what we're doing, like, we're under that pressure with the television side of things. As we go out and we do a experiment, and we have equipment malfunctioning, we're catching stuff in cameras, we're having things happen, and in the moment it's cool, it's fun, and energy gets high, and we see something, we're like, holy crap, what is that? And we ask ourselves these questions, like, okay, is this what we're really seeing in the moment? Like, we have to try and have that discussion real time. But then we're only given this much time, right? And then you guys are seeing that and highlights of that, if you will, through the television show 9 months later.
Yeah.
And so it's like, are we wrong on stuff? Sure, I bet we are. But that's why it's called an investigation. It takes time.
Yeah.
And that's where, like, Erik's like, look, we could do this for the next 20 years. And, a lot of your big studies, they take 20 years before you ever hear anything about it. They don't release any information or anything. So we're constantly dealing with that give it to me now mentality.
Yeah.
That has been infesting the human psychology for the last 20 years because of social media and stuff, and that instant gratification culture, if you will. And we're trying to do this the right way, and we're trying to get information out there quickly and show what the heck's going on. But at the same time, we're having to redo some of these, and not redo, but continue doing these experiments to see if we're continually getting the same information, right? So it's one of those things that maybe that we can help show that we're trying to do things the right way, and doing the right thing takes time, and it's not fun all the time.
Well, I think with regards to, like you mentioned, the whole social media age, you want instant gratification. I think there's also a lot of people that, with the internet age comes a lot of fake news, fake articles, fake whatever, fake information. And it's kind of gotten to a point, because the internet still isn't regulated properly. And so there's a lot of stuff. And I mean, the power of the media to me has always been extremely interesting, how the media can influence a generation, and it really can.
Oh yeah.
Now, especially and it'll be interesting to see like what's going to happen with AI, because this is something that is going to be, I think it's going to be some technology that we're busy pushing, and we're pushing it for the sake of funds or whatever the case may be. It's always money involved. Yeah.
Oh,
but
well, and it's,
yeah.
oh, I was just gonna say, look at most of your AI. It's still programmed by humans at this point. There's no true blue AI. Like
at this point, but I mean, this could switch like this.
Oh yeah.
So with I think this is going to be a thing like the internet, which we pushed out. It's having, it's had a lot of negative effects. It's had a lot of positive effects as well. Obviously, don't get me wrong. But with AI, it could be, I think it could be a lot different, and the rate of damage could increase very quickly, because we don't know, again, how are we going to regulate it? Because obviously the fear is that artificial intelligence is going to start, it's going to start programming in itself, and it's going to be the rise of the machines, so to speak, basically.
Yeah. Well, and this is where it's one of those things where I don't look at it the same, I guess, as everybody else, right? So like when you talk about regulation, I don't like that's an interesting subject, I guess I should say, because when you start regulating something, that's when you start telling people they can't do things. Essentially is what that is. And so it's like, yeah, how do you regulate something, but then at the same time, how do you protect the individual's rights? So that's like and I'm right there with you. Like, how do you move forward with that?
Well, I think
doing it in a good way.
Well, I think, well, look, we'll have to wait and see what happens to AI. But I think with the media today and with the internet, I think we went through a pandemic, which would not have been a pandemic if it wasn't for the internet.
Oh, yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. And I agree with you. Like like who regulates the regulators kind of thing.
Exactly. Now, yeah.
Yeah.
Because there are a few people working at these tech firms, and it's maybe like a handful of these decision makers that literally decide this is going to be allowed or this isn't going to be allowed. I mean, there's a whole thing with that was with Twitter, where certain things would get deleted, or certain people won't be able to see things because it didn't fit a certain political agenda type thing. Yeah, and then with a fake narrative, it's dangerous, and it's been happening for a while.
So what you're hitting on, the whole subject. So if you go back to like the founding principles of, say, the United States of America, the ultimate right was the individual's private rights were the ultimate thing that was to be protected, and that's what the founder said the role of government was to protect those rights, the rights of the people. And that worked for it worked closer to the founding ideas of how it was supposed to be for probably until about World War II, I would say. Between World War I and World War II is when you really started seeing the acceleration of the third party government that was protecting individual rights, where it started being used as a tool to not protect people's rights.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's when you see that big change that you're talking about happen. Before that, it was more that. Like, and the federal government used to be that power that was the third party, if you will, that would come in or should go in and be like, look, what you're doing is affecting this group over here, and that's not okay. Like, you cannot do that.
Yeah.
And that's what the role of the federal government should be, but it's not anymore. And you're right. They're in bed with what's going on a lot of this stuff, and it goes back to World War II and the FDR cabinet and all that, and I would probably say World War One, and you start really seeing that change then.
Hmm.
But yeah, I agree with you. Like the media has perpetrated a bunch of this stuff, or the mainstream media, and that's why I follow different individuals. Some of these other individuals who get information out there, who I would actually say are doing more of a journalist job than what all these people in the mass media are doing.
Yeah.
And you're hitting on, like, say, the UFO side of things. You're having big. I can think of one right now. They have people who put out that it's all crap.
Yeah.
That it's a big distraction or whatever. But they're pushing that side of the narrative, if you will.
Yeah.
And you still have and there's still a group of people who, like, for whatever reason, think that that's where they should go for their information, kind of thing.
Well, the thing is, it depends where. Well, first of all, where they get their info from and how credible those sources are, but then again, it's all about it all seems to come down to money at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And what narrative it fulfills, and how much money is connected or potentially connected to that narrative.
Mm-hmm. Look at and that's a problem with, like, say, your congressmen here in the U.S. now, and the lobbyists and these different things. Like, that should be one of the number one things outlawed right now, is a private corporation or whoever or anybody paying somebody to go in and start swaying senators one way or another. But then that's how you get the inside information and stuff. And it's like, they all do it. We all know. Like, look at all these senators. They go in and they were nobody. Most of them had no money, and now they're all they all have hundreds of millions of dollars in assets and stuff. Yeah. Especially on the salaries that they get paid. Like, people aren't dumb. Like, and that's one of the main problems too.
Well, unfortunately, people are dumb because because the majority, the majority believe pretty much everything that they see in the media. That's kind of like common sense has kind of gone out the window with a lot of stuff that's happening these days. But it's an interesting world we live in.
Yeah, that's for sure. That's a nice way of putting it.
Yeah, that's a way of putting it. That how we can't get into trouble. But again, that's the thing. Free speech has become such a myth as well. I mean, that is such bullshit. That doesn't exist, because once you get censored for speaking out against, again, a certain narrative that gets put out by government and that gets put out by the media, you'll get cancelled or whatever the case may be. So it's
well, and that's what's interesting is I think that's one of the gifts that COVID gave us, was that wake up call, if you will. And people really started seeing how that was being misused, or people were coming out speaking to get things, and they would get silenced or get attacked and stuff. And I think enough of your salt of the earth people are seeing it, and they're going, no more.
Kaleb, thank you very much for joining once again. Looking forward to watching the rest of season 4 and seeing what you guys come up with. And man, good luck with season 5.
Yeah, thanks, man. Love coming on and having these chats with you.
Thank you.